Everyone thought my little brother was kidnapped, but the truth was so much worse. I found out our parents were keeping him hidden, forcing him to perform for the rich while the whole city cried for him on TV. No one believed me. I was just 16, alone, terrified, and if I wanted to save him, I'd have to risk everything. This is how I uncovered the darkest secret of my own family, and what it cost us to finally escape. I'm Alisa. I'm 16 now. I guess the story I'm about to tell really started about a year ago. But if I'm being honest, the groundwork had been laid for years before that. I grew up in what most people would probably call a good family. Middle class, nice house in a decent neighborhood, 2 parents still together, no obvious drama. We looked perfectly normal from the outside. But if you'd been inside my house for even one day, you'd know it wasn't exactly balanced. I have a younger brother, Marko. He's 6 years younger than me, 10 last year. And he's, well, a prodigy. Like, for real. By the time he was 7, he could play Mozart and Beethoven better than most adults. By 9, he was performing with an actual philharmonic orchestra in the city. His picture was in the local paper. People called him the little maestro. And my parents? They were obsessed. Everything in our house revolved around Marko's career. There were no normal family dinners, only practice schedules and meetings with music teachers and rehearsals. My parents talked about his future nonstop. They were always planning the next concert, the next competition, the next press interview. I learned early on that I came second. Or third. Or not at all. It wasn't that they hated me, they just didn't see me. Not unless I caused trouble. My grades didn't matter. My hobbies didn't matter. I was the kid who was supposed to stay quiet, keep out of the way, and not ruin Marko's shot at greatness. I don't want to sound bitter. I love my brother. Really, I do. He's not like them. Marko's always been this sweet, shy little kid with a huge heart. When he'd get nervous before performances, he'd grab my hand and whisper, "Just don't mess up the introduction," like I was the one about to go on stage. And I'd squeeze his hand back and say, "You've got this." Those were some of the only times we really got to be close, hiding in the wings of some big stage, him in a tiny tuxedo, me in jeans, both of us scared in our own ways. But the rest of the time? It was lonely. My parents barely noticed my existence. They forgot my last birthday until Marko reminded them. They didn't come to my school play, even though I had a lead role. They never asked about my friends or what I wanted to do after high school. If you looked at our living room, you'd think we had one child. The whole wall was a shrine to Marko's career, framed posters, newspaper clippings, a giant photo from his first Philharmonic performance. There wasn't a single picture of me anywhere downstairs. It used to bother me more when I was younger. I'd cry about it sometimes, thinking something was wrong with me. But after a while, I just got used to being invisible. And then, everything started to change. It was subtle at first. A weird vibe in the house. Tense conversations behind closed doors. My mom on the phone late at night, whispering. My dad getting angrier than usual if I asked innocent questions. Marko seemed different too, quieter, more tired. He wasn't practicing as much. Sometimes I'd find him staring out the window instead of at the piano. I didn't know what was happening. But I was about to find out. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because I had a math test first period that I'd been dreading. I barely slept the night before, not because of the test, though. The house just felt wrong. You know that feeling when something is off, but you can't explain why? That was it. For days, my parents had been acting tense, snapping at each other in hushed voices, staying up late on their phones. My little brother Marko, yeah, my parents wanted something unique. Marko with a K, wasn't practicing piano like he usually did. He'd barely come out of his room all weekend. That morning, I overslept. No piano. That was the first thing I noticed. Normally, I'd wake up to scales and etudes floating through the house. Marko was obsessed, Or I guess I should say, my parents were obsessed. They'd pushed him into this prodigy role so hard that the sound of him practicing had basically become the soundtrack of our lives. But that morning, silence. I got dressed and went downstairs. The kitchen smelled like burnt coffee. My mom was standing at the counter in her robe, clutching her mug with both hands. She looked off. Like she hadn't slept at all. Morning, I mumbled, grabbing a piece of toast. She didn't respond. I hesitated. Where's Marko? She didn't look at me. He went with Maestro Holes. They're doing an interview for the channel. That should have sounded normal. Holes was his piano teacher/mentor, an older guy who gave off total pretentious artist vibes. My parents idolized him. But the way my mom said it, her tone was flat, forced. Like she was reciting a line. I thought about asking more, but the vibe was so weird I didn't dare. So I grabbed my backpack and left for school, trying to shake the unease. But all day, it gnawed at me. By the time I got home, the whole atmosphere in the house had changed. It was thick, suffocating. My dad was sitting on the couch, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. The TV was on some local news channel, volume low. My mom was pacing back and forth, phone clutched to her ear. I dropped my bag. What's going on? Neither of them answered. Then my mom let out this weird, strangled sob, not fake this time. Full-on crying. My dad finally looked up at me. His face was ashen. Marko's been kidnapped, he said, voice flat. I froze. What? They stopped the car, my mom choked out between sobs. After the interview. We don't know where he is. My whole body went cold. Kidnapped? How? Why would anyone take my brother? Before I could ask anything else, my mom was already dialing again, launching into another frantic conversation with a reporter. My dad turned back to the TV, where a banner was now scrolling across the bottom of the screen, breaking, prodigy pianist Marko Harper missing, possible abduction. And just like that, my entire world shattered. The next few days were a complete blur. Our house turned into something out of a bad TV movie, cameras on the lawn, news vans parked across the street, reporters trying to shove microphones in our faces every time we stepped outside. My parents were everywhere. My mom gave teary interviews on every local news channel. My dad went on a radio show, his voice trembling as he begged for Marko's safe return. They launched a foundation, Bring Marko Home. Someone made a website. People from all over started donating. It was surreal. Flyers with Marko's face went up on every telephone pole in the city. Social media blew up. Hashtags were trending, hashtag find Marko, hashtag little maestro. And through it all, I felt like I was watching from outside my own body. At school, kids whispered when I walked down the hall. Teachers gave me these pitying looks. Everyone kept asking if I was okay. I wasn't. But what could I say? At home, that was where it really didn't make sense. On camera, my parents were frantic, crying, desperate. But behind closed doors, it wasn't like that. Not really. There were no sleepless nights. No frantic pacing. No grief. Instead, they spent hours at the computer, tracking donations. Watching the news. Planning the next media appearance. I overheard them talking one night in the kitchen. My mom, it's terrible, but the support has been overwhelming. My dad, we need to keep the momentum up. The more exposure, the better. The way they said it, like this was some PR campaign. Like my brother was a brand, not a missing child. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. That they were just trying to stay strong. But it got harder to believe. Every night, after the cameras left, they'd sit at the dining room table with their laptops open, spreadsheets on the screen. I heard my mom actually say one night, "We've never raised this much money for anything." It's scary, but incredible. And that's when this tiny voice in my head started whispering something I didn't want to hear. Something is wrong. I started watching them closer. Listening. Picking up on things. And then I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. It was late, probably close to midnight. I couldn't sleep. I'd been lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when I heard voices downstairs. Not loud, more like that urgent, hushed kind of arguing. My door was cracked just enough to hear. I crept out quietly and sat at the top of the stairs, heart pounding. My parents were in the kitchen. My dad had his laptop open. My mom was pacing, her arms crossed tight across her chest. "Dad, we need to raise the stakes. The story's getting stale, people will lose interest." "Mom, I know. But, is Marko holding up?" "Marko. Holding up." My stomach dropped. "Dad, he's still fine. Hole says he's cooperating. But we can't drag it too long. Mom, a few more months, that's all we need." I had to clamp a hand over my mouth to keep from gasping. They knew where he was. They weren't panicked. They weren't searching. They were planning. My whole body was shaking. I sat there frozen until they eventually left the kitchen. Then I crawled back to my room and locked the door. My brain was going a million miles a minute. My brother wasn't missing, they were keeping him somewhere. And using him. The next morning, everything looked normal again. My parents were back in grieving family mode for the cameras. But I couldn't look at them the same anymore. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating much. All I could think about was that conversation. I knew I needed proof, something real. Something I could show someone. So I started digging. I wasn't stupid, I knew if I confronted them, they'd either lie or shut me down completely. I needed something solid. Evidence. The problem was, my parents were paranoid about their devices. Passwords on everything. My dad's laptop was locked tighter than Fort Knox. But my mom was a little sloppier. She still used her old tablet sometimes, an older iPad that sat in the kitchen drawer. She thought of it as just for recipes and probably forgot it was synced to her main accounts. One afternoon, while my parents were out meeting with lawyers, aka another TV interview, I dug it out. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The screen was locked, but the code was my brother's birthday. Typical. Once I was in, I went straight to her email. Thousands of messages. My heart sank a little, I didn't even know what I was looking for. But then I saw it, a folder called Club. I clicked it. Inside were maybe a dozen emails. Most were forwards from some encrypted messaging app. One stood out, the subject line was, "Private Client Event, Maestro Club." I opened it. It was an invite. A private online group for elite music enthusiasts. The description was vague, but there was a link to a locked video page. I copied the link and ran to my room. On my own laptop, I opened it. The site was basic but slick, members only, password protected. But the invite had the password. I typed it in. The main page was a forum, anonymous users, posts about private performances, exclusive events, donations in the thousands. One thread caught my eye, "Live Little Maestro, new session added." My throat closed up. I clicked. A video loaded. The timestamp was from the night before. And there he was. Marko. He looked awful, pale, tired, sitting stiffly at a small upright piano in a plain room. His eyes were flat, empty. A camera was set up next to him, recording everything. He started to play Chopin's Nocturne. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't some old recital video. The chat alongside the stream was live, full of comments like, "Beautiful tone. When's the next session? Sent another $5,000 donation. Would love a private request, can we arrange?" I slammed my laptop shut. There was no doubt anymore. My parents weren't just covering up his disappearance, they were behind it. They were keeping him somewhere. They were selling access to him. And now I knew. But what the hell could I do? For the next 2 days, I could barely function. I went to school, sat through classes in a daze, didn't hear a word anyone said. All I could think about was that video. Marko, trapped somewhere, playing piano for strangers while my parents counted donations. At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying their conversation in the kitchen. He's still fine. A few more months. I thought about running away. I even packed a bag. But every time I zipped it shut, I saw Marko's face on that screen. Pale. Tired. I couldn't leave him behind. So I made a new plan. If they were keeping him somewhere, I could find out where. I started paying closer attention to their routines. Listening to every conversation. Watching where they went. That's when I noticed something strange. About twice a week, always late at night, they both left together. No press events, no interviews scheduled. They'd leave around 9 or 10 p.m. and be gone for a few hours. When I asked where they were going, they gave vague answers, meeting with lawyers, foundation business. But they never took their phones. That was weird, my mom always had her phone glued to her hand. I started tracking it. Every time they left, I watched. After a few tries, I realized they always went the same direction, toward the old part of town. There's this abandoned music college downtown, Harper Conservatory. It closed a few years ago, but some of the old buildings are still standing. My dad used to teach there years ago, back when money was tight. He still had keys. And suddenly it clicked. An empty building. Soundproof rooms. Private space, no one to ask questions. That had to be it. Now I just needed proof. I waited another week, watching their every move. They stuck to their pattern, 2 nights a week, same time, same direction. Always late, always both of them gone for about 3 or 4 hours. Meanwhile, I kept digging. I found an old post from my dad's teaching days, an article about the Harper Conservatory. It mentioned that even after the school shut down, the old recording studio in the basement had been left mostly intact. Bingo. I started preparing. I didn't tell anyone, not friends, not teachers. Who would believe me? My parents were on TV almost daily, sobbing about their missing son. No one would have believed their ordinary daughter. Finally, the night came. They left just after 9 p.m. I watched from my bedroom window as their car pulled out and turned toward downtown. I grabbed my backpack, flashlight, gloves, a pocket knife I found in Dad's old toolbox. Not because I planned to use it, but because I needed to feel like I wasn't helpless. And I had one more thing, the old door code. I'd overheard my dad mention it once to a former student who came by last year, still the same combo, 1-9-6-3. The year the conservatory was founded. They were lazy like that. I biked across town. It was cold and damp. Every shadow looked like it was moving. When I got to the old music building, the place looked abandoned. Broken windows, faded sign, graffiti on the walls. But around the back, near the service entrance, there was a keypad next to a steel door. I punched in 1-9-6-3. The lock clicked. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I'd faint. But I forced myself to go in. The hallway smelled like mold and old wood. The overhead lights were dead, but there was a faint glow coming from downstairs. I crept down the stairs, flashlight off. The closer I got, the more I could hear it, music. Soft, hesitant piano notes echoing through the empty halls. And then I saw it. One room down the hall had a light on. The door was half open. I crept up and peeked inside. Marko was sitting at an upright piano in the corner of the room. He looked thinner than ever. Dark circles under his eyes. A camera and mic were set up next to him. There were cables running to a laptop on a nearby table. He was alone. I swallowed hard. "Marko," I whispered. He flinched, then turned, eyes wide. At first, he just stared. Then his lips started to tremble. Alisa, is it really you? I stepped inside. Yeah. It's me. I'm getting you out of here. He jumped up so fast the bench toppled over. They said if I ran, they'd hurt you. My throat tightened. They lied. You're coming with me. Now. Marko was shaking. His whole body was trembling as he clung to me. They said you were dangerous too, he whispered. They said if I didn't play, you'd be taken away. I hugged him tight. They lied to you, Marko. We have to go. Right now. His eyes darted toward the camera. The cameras? I know, I said. We're not going out the front. I had already noticed an old emergency exit marked on a dusty building map in the hall. It led out to the side alley, where there were no visible cameras. I grabbed his hand. Come on. We don't have much time. He hesitated, then nodded. I could tell how scared he was, but he still followed me. We slipped out of the room and down the hall, moving fast but quiet. The music had stopped, the building was eerily silent except for the creak of the old floorboards. At the emergency door, I held my breath and shoved it open. The rusty hinges groaned louder than I wanted, but no alarms went off. Cold air hit us as we bolted outside. I led him down the alley, through a gap in the fence, and across 2 blocks to an old workshop that I knew would be empty. One of my old friend's dads used to rent it for woodworking. He wasn't using it anymore, but the back door still opened if you jiggled it right. We ducked inside and slammed the door shut behind us. Both of us were gasping for breath. Marko collapsed onto an old couch, burying his face in his hands. Are they going to find us? I knelt in front of him. No. Not tonight. You're safe with me. But my mind was racing. We couldn't stay here forever. I needed help, someone who'd believe me. Someone who wasn't under my parents' spell. And then I remembered Ms. Martha. She was an old friend of our grandfather's, a retired teacher, but also a big advocate for child protection services. I'd overheard her name enough times to know she was one of the few adults who didn't worship my parents. I pulled out my phone and texted her with shaking fingers. It's Alisa. I need your help. It's about Marko. Please don't tell anyone. It's urgent. I didn't expect her to answer right away, but within 2 minutes, my phone buzzed. Where are you? I told her. She responded instantly, stay put. I'm coming. For the first time in weeks, I let out a breath. Help was coming. We waited in that freezing workshop for what felt like forever. Marko was curled up on the old couch, still trembling. I wrapped him in my hoodie and sat next to him, holding his hand. Every noise outside made my heart jump. I kept checking my phone, no new messages, no missed calls. But Ms. Martha had said she was coming. I just had to trust her. Finally, about an hour later, headlights swept across the alley. A car pulled up, and the engine cut. A soft knock at the door. Alisa? It's Martha. I opened it just a crack to make sure, and there she was. Early 60s, silver hair, sharp eyes. Always reminded me of a no-nonsense librarian. She took one look at us, at Marko's pale face and my shaking hands, and her expression softened. Come on, kids. Let's get you somewhere warm. She bundled us into her car and drove us straight to her apartment in the historic district. The place was old but cozy, books everywhere, the smell of tea in the air. Marko sank onto the couch, clutching a pillow like it was a life raft. Martha knelt in front of him. You're safe here. No one will hurt you. But we need to talk, okay? I told her everything, from the weird conversations to the website to what I'd seen in that basement. I even showed her screenshots I'd taken from the Maestro Club forum and the video of Marko playing. Martha's face grew tighter with every word. This is bigger than I thought, she said finally. This isn't just fraud. It's exploitation. And abuse. She pulled out her phone and made a call to an investigator she knew through her child protection work. I couldn't hear the whole conversation, but it sounded serious. When she hung up, she looked at us gently but firmly. "You're both staying here tonight. Tomorrow, we do this the right way. I'm not letting them near you again." For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. I helped Marko get settled in a spare room. He was still scared. He kept asking, "What if they find us?" over and over. I sat on the edge of the bed and held his hand. "They won't. And even if they try, we're not alone anymore." He looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. "I just want to go home." I squeezed his hand tighter. "We will. But not their version of home. We'll make a new one. One where you're safe." And deep down, I made a promise. No matter what happens, I'm not letting them take him again. The next morning, everything started moving fast. Martha's investigator friend showed up first thing. His name was Detective Pierce, mid-50s, serious but kind. The kind of guy who looked like he'd seen a lot but hadn't lost his sense of right and wrong. He sat us down separately to talk. First me. I told him everything. From the first weird morning when Marko was missing, to the overheard conversations, to finding the website and the video. I even pulled up the screenshots again. He listened without interrupting, taking notes the whole time. When I finished, he looked me straight in the eye. "You've done the right thing coming here. What you've uncovered, it's serious. Very serious. This is child exploitation, conspiracy, and fraud at the very least." Then he spoke with Marko. That was harder. Marko had a hard time getting started. He was so nervous he could barely look at Pierce. Martha and I waited in the other room, both of us pacing. After about 40 minutes, Pierce came back out, looking more grim than ever. "He told me everything," he said quietly. "They locked him in that basement. Said it would be for a few days at first. Then a few weeks. Then just a bit longer. They made him play for private clients, streamed it online. Told him if he refused, they'd hurt you." I felt tears stinging my eyes. I wanted to scream. But I forced myself to stay calm. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," Pierce said, "we open a full case. And we protect both of you." Within an hour, 2 more officers from the Child Protection Unit arrived. They interviewed both of us again, very carefully, very gently. They confirmed that under no circumstances were we to return home or contact our parents. "They're going to notice Marko's missing," I said. "They'll come looking." "They might," one officer said. "But if they do, the department is ready. A criminal case is already being filed." Later that afternoon, the news broke. TV anchors were suddenly reporting, breaking, "Parents of missing prodigy under investigation for fraud and child exploitation." Our story, the real story, was finally out. Martha turned off the TV and looked at us. "This is only the beginning," she said. "But you're safe now. And we're going to make sure they never hurt you again." For the first time in a long time, I believed it. The next 24 hours were terrifying. Even though we were safe at Martha's, I couldn't shake the fear that any moment my parents would burst through the door. And then the news came in, they had noticed. Detective Pierce got the call first. My parents had reported Marko missing from home, claiming they had no idea where he'd gone and that someone must have abducted him again. Classic. But now the police were watching them. Not us. By the end of the day, the department had obtained enough evidence to officially open the case. A warrant was issued to search the basement at the conservatory. They also froze the Bring Marko Home Foundation's accounts, which, it turned out, had raked in hundreds of thousands of dollars. That night, Pierce came by to update us. "They're going to run. We're watching the airports and the border," he said. Sure enough, the next morning, my parents tried to leave the state. They were caught in their car at the interstate checkpoint, bags packed, passports hidden under the seat. They were arrested on the spot. When Martha told us, I almost collapsed from relief. Marko just stared at her, wide-eyed. "Does that mean they can't take me back?" he asked in this tiny voice. Martha hugged him. "No, sweetheart. They can't." But it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. A high-profile trial was coming, and they were going to fight dirty. The trial was set for 3 weeks later. It was fast-tracked because of the seriousness of the charges, and because the case had become a media storm. Every major outlet picked it up. Prodigy pianist parents accused of fraud and exploitation. Overnight, my parents went from public darlings to public villains. Martha made sure Marko and I stayed out of the spotlight. We were moved to a temporary foster placement with friends of hers, a kind older couple who lived in a quiet neighborhood across town. Marko was terrified about the trial. So was I. But Detective Pierce and the child protection lawyers prepped us carefully. I would testify in person. Marko, because of his age and trauma, would give a recorded statement and testify via video link under protection. The day of the first hearing, my heart felt like it was going to explode out of my chest. I'll never forget walking into that courtroom. My parents were sitting at the defense table, looking pale but still trying to look composed for the cameras. My mom actually tried to give me this sad little smile when I walked in. I ignored her. When it was my turn, I sat at the witness stand with my palms sweating. The prosecutor asked me to walk through everything, what I'd seen, what I'd heard, the video, the website, the escape. I told it all. No tears, no shaking voice. Just facts. I wanted them to know I wasn't afraid of them anymore. Then it was time for Marko's video testimony. The room went silent as his little voice came over the speakers. They locked me in the room. They told me to play for special people. They said if I didn't, they'd take my sister away. I wanted to go home. That was when I lost it. Silent tears rolling down my face. Even the judge looked shaken. The evidence was overwhelming: video, chat logs, financial records, even the keys to the conservatory basement found in my dad's car. But my parents? They played their part to the end. In court, my mom wailed about having a mental breakdown, claiming they didn't know what they were doing. My dad said it had been a desperate mistake. The prosecutor didn't even flinch. "You deliberately created a private club, marketed it to wealthy clients, and forced your child to perform under duress, for 8 months, he said calmly. After 3 weeks of testimony, the verdict was handed down. My father, 20 years in prison. My mother, 18 years. The judge called it one of the most callous cases of child exploitation this court has ever seen. When it was over, Marko grabbed my hand. "Are we free now?" he whispered. I squeezed his hand back. "Yeah, buddy. We're free." After the trial, everything changed. The first thing Martha did was help us secure guardianship. The court agreed immediately. There was no one left from my parents' side who could contest it. But then, out of the blue, my mom's sister, Aunt Lila, reached out. She'd been living out of state for years and hadn't known the full story until the trial coverage hit national news. She flew in the week after the verdict and met with us. I was cautious at first, but the moment she saw us, she broke down crying. "I had no idea," she kept saying. "I should have seen something. I should have come sooner." She asked if she could take guardianship and move us to her city, fresh start, new school, new everything. Martha agreed, and so did we. Leaving was bittersweet. Martha had been a rock for us. But she promised we'd stay in touch, and she meant it. A month later, Marko and I were living in a new town, in a warm, quiet house with Aunt Lila. At first, it was rough. Marko wouldn't sleep alone. He'd wake up crying from nightmares. He refused to touch the piano. But Aunt Lila was patient. We got him into therapy. I started seeing someone too, to deal with everything I'd bottled up. Slowly, things got better. By the 3rd month, Marko was sleeping through most nights. He even made a few friends at school. And then, one day, I came home to find him sitting at the old upright piano Aunt Lila had in her den. He was just touching the keys, hesitantly. Not playing. But a week later, on his own, he played a short waltz. His fingers trembled the whole time, but he finished it. When he turned to me, he whispered, "I'm playing because I want to now. Not because I have to." I hugged him so tight. And in that moment, I knew, we were healing. 6 months passed. Life wasn't perfect, it would never be exactly normal again. But it was better. We'd both started new schools. Aunt Lila was incredible, supportive without hovering, patient when either of us had bad days. Marko still struggled with small spaces, he hated basements, elevators, even small classrooms. But therapy was helping. Little by little, the tightness in his shoulders started to ease. And me? I'd finally allowed myself to breathe again. For months, I'd lived in constant fear, that they'd find us, that someone would believe their lies, that we'd get dragged back into that nightmare. But now, with the trial over and their sentences locked in, that fear started to fade. I still had moments, I'd wake up from a nightmare, or catch myself checking shadows out of habit. But mostly, life was calm. One afternoon, 6 months to the day after the verdict, Aunt Lila surprised us with a little party for Marko's birthday. Just us, a few friends from school, a cake with his name on it in bright blue frosting. For a minute, I was afraid it would overwhelm him. But when we lit the candles, he smiled, a real smile, not the tight, scared one he used to wear. After cake, he sat at the piano without anyone asking. Played a bright, simple piece, something light, nothing heavy. When he finished, everyone clapped. He looked at me and said softly, "I think I like playing again." And that's when I knew, we were really moving forward. Later that night, after everyone left, I found Marko sitting on the couch, looking thoughtful. "Do you think they'll ever come back?" he asked quietly. I didn't lie. Maybe. But they'll never have power over us again. He nodded slowly. And that was the truth, they could never take from us what we'd already reclaimed, our freedom. It's been almost a year now. Sometimes it feels like that whole nightmare happened to someone else. Other times, a smell or a sound will hit me and it all comes rushing back. But we're okay. We're living with Aunt Lila full-time now. She officially became our legal guardian last month. She's been amazing, letting us heal at our own pace, never pushing, never prying. Marko is thriving. He's got friends at school. He started performing again, nothing big, just school recitals and community events. But the difference now is huge, he wants to do it. It's on his terms. The first time I saw him smile on stage, a real, unforced smile, I cried. I didn't even care who saw. Me? I'm finishing junior year. I've been thinking a lot about what comes next. I used to feel invisible, trapped in my parents' shadow. Now, I know I'm stronger than I ever thought I could be. I'm thinking about going into social work or child advocacy. If what happened to us can help someone else down the line, maybe that's one good thing to come out of it. As for my parents, their names are now linked to one of the worst child exploitation cases our city has ever seen. Their foundation is shut down. Their social circle has vanished. I haven't forgiven them. I don't know if I ever will. But I'm not afraid of them anymore. Marko and I made it out. We're building something new, something real. And that's what matters.